Our top focus on gravitas. Is there a secret NATO plot to remove Ukraine Zelensky? NATO, the Western coalition headed by America, which has armed and financed Ukraine's response to the Russian occupation, is now growing tired of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky because he has failed to stop the Russian advance and has now become an obstacle to peace negotiations with Moscow. And also, Zelensky continues to demand money and arms from the West without any hint of accountability. And this is what the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, is alleging. Well, that may be predictable, but this is also the growing sense of reports and commentary appearing in Western capitals. According to the SVR, NATO members are working quietly towards a change in Ukraine's leadership. One turning point came when Zelensky removed his most successful general, we are talking about General Valery Zolonshiny, in March 2024 and sent him to London as Ukraine's ambassador. Now, you could argue that it's no surprise that Russia is saying this. After all, Russia is at war with Ukraine and has its own motives for wanting to change Ukraine's leadership. And you would not be wrong saying that. Still, we cannot help but ask this question. What if what Russia is saying is true? Could there be merit to SVR's claims about a change in leadership in Ukraine? The SVR says that NATO is mulling ways to facilitate Zelensky's removal. One of the ways they could apparently do this is by discrediting him ahead of potential elections in Ukraine next fall. SVR claims that Western officials view Zelensky as a barrier to peace talks with Moscow. You see, Zelensky's term as the president of Ukraine expired last May. However, he has remained in office, refusing to resign during a time of war. Presidential polls in Ukraine have been postponed also due to the martial law imposed when the war began in 2022. According to the SVR, Western leaders want to freeze the war in Ukraine. They allegedly want to steer both Moscow and Kiev towards negotiations. But now, they see Zelensky as an obstacle to achieving this very goal. The Russian intelligence agency claims that NATO is allegedly preparing a campaign to undermine Zelensky's position. And this could involve, number one, releasing information that purportedly connects Zelensky and his administration to misappropriation of over $1.5 billion, which were designated for military equipment purchases. The SVR has also alleged that Zelensky was implicated in the illegal sale of Western-supplied weapons to armed groups in Africa. Well, the question is, how much of all this is true? It's difficult to say at this point of time, especially during wartime. Now, the SVR also claims that with Trump's return to power in the US, there is increasing uncertainty regarding the future of Western support for Ukraine, which may have accelerated efforts to replace Zelensky. However, neither NATO nor Ukrainian officials have publicly addressed the SVR's claims so far. Now, do Russia's claims have any validity? Again, it's hard to say at this point of time. Moreover, Ukraine's history with corruption only complicates matters further. In fact, corruption has been cited as the major reason why Ukraine is still not a part of NATO or the European Union. Western leaders have repeatedly emphasized the need for Ukraine to address corruption as a top priority. Since the conflict began, scandals related to military spending have emerged, including instances of price gouging on food supplies for armed forces, overpriced winter gear, and also unfulfilled contracts for mortar shells. This corruption has led to questions about the integrity as well as efficiency of Ukraine's governance. And NATO member states have also expressed frustration with Zelensky's demands and the never-ending war. For instance, Poland, which was once Ukraine's staunch ally, expressed frustration with Zelensky's lack of gratitude. Polish Defense Minister talked about the general sense of fatigue from the war in Poland. Speaking to Financial Times, he said, and I'm quoting him here, of course there is fatigue in Polish society, and it is understandable, especially when people here see young Ukrainian men driving the latest models of cars or staying in five-star hotels. Not stopping there, he goes on to say that on the one hand, I understand Zelensky because it is his role to always demand greater assistance. But I think he and Ukraine must also remember that when others were only sending helmets, we sent tanks, unquote. That response was an apparent reference to a recent point of friction between the two countries over Warsaw's refusal to supply Kiev with its remaining stock of MiG-29 jets. Warsaw had said that they needed them for their own security. Warsaw's refusal to send more aircraft showed the cracks in the NATO alliance. But it's not just Poland. In the US, a recent opinion poll has shown that support for arming Ukraine had declined amongst Americans also. And in Germany, EU's most powerful member, lawmakers and military officials say that there is nothing left to give to Ukraine from the German armed forces' past talks. Meanwhile, Russia has repeatedly said that it is open to talks, but has pointed out that it is unable to do so because of the ban on talks that was announced by Zelensky in 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also stated that freezing the conflict is unacceptable and that Ukraine's accession to NATO cannot be allowed. For Russia, the demands to end the war are very clear, and now Russia has also joined the US in urging Ukraine to hold elections. Trump's envoy, Keith Kellogg, stated that elections during wartime are essential for democracy. However, Ukraine fears that holding elections now could weaken national unity and invite Russian influence. But as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has highlighted, the war is not just about fighting back against Russia, but recognizing the current challenges and the ongoing human suffering. Rubio has stated that the goal should not be a prolonged stalemate on the battlefield. And while some within the Western Bloc continue to support Zelensky's strong leadership during the war, others have argued that his grip on power may not be good for Ukraine. On top of that, Zelensky's popularity is also declining, with more and more Ukrainians expressing concern over his centralization of power, which may undermine the country's democracy. Zelensky says that holding elections would require a change to the electoral code, prohibiting votes during martial law, ensuring fair voting procedure for those serving in combat, and also reaching the millions of Ukrainians displaced during the war. It raises this very question: who will fund that? Will US or EU fund elections in Ukraine? That seems highly unlikely, knowing what we know now. Would it come as a surprise then? NATO has grown wary of Zelensky.